Native woman said, "I'm not made for love." Lonely rancher whispered, "You're coming with me." The morning came slowly over the dry hills, bringing soft light across the wide land outside the small ranch town. Dust lifted gently from the road as wagons and horses moved through the quiet streets. Most people already knew each other here. They greeted with nods, short smiles, and familiar conversations. Nothing new happened often, and strangers were easy to notice. That was why people noticed her immediately. She arrived without noise, walking beside a tired horse that carried only a small pack. Her clothes were worn but clean, her dark hair tied back simply, and her eyes held the distant calm that made people unsure how to approach her. Some whispered that she was native, though no one knew her story or where she came from. She did not ask questions, and she did not offer answers. She went straight to the general store, spoke quietly to the owner, and asked for work. When he said there was nothing available, she thanked him politely and left without complaint. She tried the stables next, then the small cafe near the edge of town. Each time she received the same response. Maybe later, maybe next week, maybe somewhere else. By afternoon, people stopped watching her closely. The town returned to its rhythm, and she became just another shadow moving along the edges. Except for one man. The rancher stood near the feed supply building, watching as she walked toward the open fields beyond town. He was known as a quiet man, someone who spoke only when necessary. His ranch sat several miles outside the town limits, surrounded by long fences and wide land that stretched toward the hills. He lived alone, and most people assumed he preferred it that way. He did not know why he kept watching her. Maybe it was the way she moved. Careful but strong, as if she had learned to carry her own weight long ago. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact, not out of fear but out of habit. Or maybe it was something deeper he could not name. He turned away eventually, telling himself it was none of his business. The woman found temporary shelter near the edge of town, in an abandoned shed that offered little protection from the cold nights. She cleaned it quietly, sweeping dust and arranging her few belongings carefully. When evening came, she sat outside, watching the sky darken. A group of townspeople passed by, their voices carrying through the air. One woman tried to speak to her, offering a small greeting, but the stranger responded only with a brief nod. It was not rude, just distant. Days passed like this. She woke early each morning and searched for work. Sometimes she helped unload goods from wagons without being asked, accepting only small coins in return. Other times she assisted at the stables, calming nervous horses with gentle patience that surprised those watching. Still, she never stayed long enough to become familiar. People began forming opinions. Some said she was proud. Others said she was shy. A few said she must be running from something. The rancher heard these conversations but said nothing. He visited town once a week to buy supplies, always finishing quickly and returning to his quiet land. Yet each visit, his eyes searched for her without meaning to. One afternoon he found her sitting near the well, repairing a torn piece of cloth with careful hands. The sun lit her face softly, showing both strength and tiredness. He hesitated before approaching. "Water's cold today," he said, unsure why he chose those words. She looked up slowly. Her expression remained guarded, but she did not seem surprised by his presence.
"It's good," she replied simply.
Her voice was calm, steady. He nodded and filled a bucket. Silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. "You're new," he said after a moment. "Yes. You planning to stay?" She paused, as if considering how much to reveal.
"Only until I find work."
There was no self-pity in her tone. Just fact. He studied her briefly. "Town slow this season." "I noticed." Another silence followed. Another silence followed. Then she spoke words that stayed with him long after. "I'm not made for love," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself rather than to him. He frowned slightly, unsure how to respond. The statement felt heavy, carrying stories he did not know. He did not ask questions. He understood too well that some wounds were not ready for strangers. Instead, he simply said, "Everyone says things they don't believe forever." She did not reply. Her gaze returned to the cloth in her hands. The rancher left soon after, but the words echoed in his mind during the long ride back to his ranch. The land stretched wide around him, empty except for wind and distant birds. He thought about loneliness, not as sadness, but as something that became familiar over time. He knew loneliness well. The next morning brought strong winds, carrying dust across the fields. The woman struggled to find work again. A group of travelers arrived, bringing brief activity to town, but they left quickly, leaving her standing alone once more. Late in the afternoon, the rancher returned unexpectedly. He tied his horse near the store and walked toward her. "I need help at the ranch," he said without greeting. "Temporary work. Fences need repair." She looked at him carefully, searching for hidden meaning. "Why me?" "You work hard," he answered simply. She hesitated. Trust did not come easily to her, and she had learned to question kindness. "I don't stay long anywhere," she said. "That's your choice." Another pause. The wind lifted strands of her hair across her face. "I don't want trouble," she added. "Neither do I." Something in his calm tone made it difficult to refuse. He was not offering rescue or promises, only work. She nodded slowly. The ride to the ranch was quiet. The land grew wider, more open, until the town disappeared behind rolling hills. The ranch itself was modest but strong, built with care rather than wealth. Horses moved calmly in the fields, and the air felt different here. Quieter, freer. He showed her a small cabin near the barn. "You can stay here while you work," he said. She stepped inside, looking around at the simple space. It was clean, prepared, as if he had expected someone long before she arrived.
"Thank you,"
she said quietly.
"Thank you."
The first evening passed without many words. They worked side by side repairing broken fence lines, their movements steady and practiced. She handled tools confidently, surprising him again. When the sun set, painting the sky with soft colors, they stood silently watching. For the first time since arriving in town, she seemed slightly less tense. Days turned into routine. Early mornings, shared work, quiet meals. The rancher did not ask about her past, and she did not offer it. Slowly, small conversations began about weather, animals, and simple memories that did not hurt to share. One evening, as they finished feeding the horses, she spoke again. "You didn't ask my name." He smiled faintly. "You didn't offer it." She considered this, then said softly, "Maybe I will someday." He nodded, accepting her pace. The ranch felt different with another person there. Not louder, just less empty. G still carried distance in her eyes, but sometimes he caught glimpses of something softer when she thought no one watched. And though she had said she was not made for love, something unspoken began to grow between them. Not romance yet, but understanding. The story had only just begun. The mornings at the ranch followed a quiet rhythm that felt different from the busy noise of the town. The woman woke before sunrise each day, stepping outside into the cool air, while the sky slowly turned from dark blue to soft gold. The land stretched wide in every direction, giving a sense of space that felt both peaceful and lonely. She liked that no one watched her here. The rancher had already begun working by the time she walked toward the barn. He moved steadily, feeding the horses and checking fences, as if guided by habit rather than thought. He nodded when he saw her, but did not speak right away. That was something she appreciated. He never forced conversation. They worked side by side in silence for a long time. At first, she expected the calm to break. In other places she had stayed, kindness often turned into questions, and questions turned into pressure. But here, days passed without him asking about her past. The absence of curiosity felt strange. Slowly she began to relax. One morning, while repairing a broken gate together, she noticed him watching her hands as she tied the rope with quick skill. "You learned that somewhere far from here," he said casually. She paused. "Yes." He waited, but she did not explain further. Instead of pressing, he simply nodded again. Trust for her came in small pieces. The ranch required constant effort. Fences broke under strong winds. Water lines needed repair. Horses sometimes wandered too far and had to be brought back before nightfall. The work was physical but honest, and she found comfort in tasks that demanded focus instead of thoughts. During breaks, they sat near the barn drinking water from metal cups. Sometimes he spoke about the land, how storms changed the soil, how animals behaved before rain, how silence could tell stories if a person listened carefully. She listened more than she spoke, but her eyes followed his words. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered unexpectedly. Strong winds pushed across the hills, carrying dust and cold air. They hurried to secure loose tools and guide the animals into shelter before the storm reached them. Rain arrived suddenly, heavy and loud against the roof. They stood inside the barn, watching water pour down like a curtain. "You're not afraid of storms," he said after noticing her calm expression. "I've seen worse," she replied quietly. Her tone carried something deeper, memories she did not share. When the storm passed, the land smelled fresh, and the sky opened into bright colors. They walked the fence line together to check for damage. At one point, her foot slipped on wet ground, and he reached out instinctively to steady her. She froze for a moment, surprised by the contact, then gently stepped away. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "I know," he replied, not offended. The moment lingered in silence. She realized she was not used to being touched without expectation. That realization stayed with her long after. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, she began to learn the rhythm of his life. He rose early, worked steadily, and spent evenings repairing tools or writing notes in an old journal. He rarely visited town unless necessary. At night, he sometimes sat outside watching the sky, as if searching for something lost. One evening, she joined him without being asked. They sat a few feet apart, listening to insects and distant wind. "You don't talk much," she said suddenly. He smiled slightly. "Neither do you." She considered that. "People expect stories," she said. "I don't like telling them." "Then don't." The simple acceptance surprised her again. She looked at the horizon for a long time before speaking softly. "Most places I went, people wanted to fix me, or change me."
"And here?" he asked.
"You don't try."
He shrugged lightly.
"People aren't broken tools." The words stayed with her. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen without being judged. Still, part of her remained guarded. She kept emotional distance, reminding herself that nothing lasted forever. One morning while organizing supplies in the barn, she noticed an old photograph pinned near his tools. It showed a younger version of him standing beside another person. The image looked worn from time. She did not ask about it, but he noticed her looking. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly. She nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Pain existed on both sides. As days passed, small habits formed between them. He left extra tea near the kitchen table because he noticed she preferred it. She repaired a loose step near his cabin without mentioning it. They shared meals without ceremony, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to the sounds of the ranch. The quiet connection grew naturally. One afternoon, while bringing water to the horses, she began humming softly without realizing it. The sound carried through the air, gentle and steady. He paused his work, listening. It was the first time he had heard her express something beyond guarded silence. She stopped suddenly when she noticed him. "I didn't mean to," she said quickly. "It's fine," he replied. It sounded peaceful. She turned away, slightly embarrassed, but something inside her felt lighter. Later that week, they rode into town together to buy supplies. The familiar streets felt different now that she returned with someone beside her. People looked at them curiously, whispering quietly. She felt tension rising again. He seemed to notice. Without making a scene, he walked calmly beside her, treating her presence as completely natural. The simple gesture made it easier to breathe. Inside the store, she saw someone from her earlier days in town. The woman smiled politely but spoke cautiously, unsure how to approach her now. "You look different," the woman said. "Maybe I am," she replied. As they left town, she realized something had changed. The ranch was no longer just temporary shelter. It was becoming a place where she felt safe. That realization frightened her. Safety meant attachment, and attachment meant risk. That evening, while finishing work, she spoke suddenly. "I won't stay forever," she said. He leaned against the fence, considering her words. "I never asked you to. I just want you to know." "I already do!" She watched his calm reaction carefully. There was no disappointment in his voice, only understanding. That made it harder. As the sun set, they stood watching the sky turn orange and purple. Wind moved gently across the grass, carrying a quiet peace. She remembered her own words from weeks earlier. "I'm not made for love." She had believed them completely. Love meant loss. Love meant pain. It was easier to stay alone. But here, surrounded by simple kindness and steady presence, that belief felt less certain. She did not know what to do with that feeling yet. For now, she chose to keep working, keep moving forward day by day. The quiet rhythm of the ranch continued, but something in the air began to feel different. The woman noticed it first, a small sense of unease she could not fully explain. The wind seemed sharper, the nights longer, and her thoughts heavier than before. She tried to ignore it. Each morning she woke early and followed the same routine, feeding the horses, checking water lines, repairing tools. The work helped her stay focused, but her mind kept drifting back to memories she usually kept buried. She felt as if something from her past was slowly moving closer, even though she had no proof. The rancher noticed the change in her without needing words. She moved faster, spoke less, and often paused as if listening for something far away. He did not ask questions, but he watched carefully. One afternoon, while fixing a section of fence together, a distant figure appeared on the road leading toward the ranch. At first it looked like any traveler passing through, but as the person came closer, she froze. Her body went still. The rancher followed her gaze. A man rode slowly toward them, dust rising behind his horse. The closer he came, the more tense she became. "You know him," the rancher said quietly. She nodded once, her eyes hard. The man stopped near the fence and looked at her with a small smile that did not reach his eyes. "I wondered how long it would take to find you," he said. Her voice remained calm but firm. "You shouldn't be here." The rancher stayed silent, giving her space while standing close enough to support her if needed. "I just want to talk," the man replied, glancing briefly at the rancher. "Didn't know you had company now." She stepped forward slightly, placing herself between the two men.
"There's nothing to say." The air grew heavy. The rancher felt tension building but resisted the urge to step in too quickly.
He understood that this moment belonged to her. The stranger sighed. "You can't keep running forever." "I'm not running," she said. "Then why hide?" She did not answer. Instead, she turned toward the rancher. "I need a moment," she said quietly. He nodded and walked toward the barn, leaving them alone but remaining close enough to hear if needed.
The conversation between them stayed low and tense.
She spoke firmly, refusing whatever the man offered or suggested. After several minutes, he finally turned his horse around. "This isn't over," he said before leaving. When he disappeared down the road, she stood still for a long time.
The rancher approached slowly.
"Do you want to talk about it?" "No," she said quickly, then paused. "Not yet." He accepted that. The rest of the day passed quietly, but the peaceful rhythm they had built felt shaken. She worked harder than usual, as if trying to outrun her thoughts. That evening she avoided sitting outside with him like she usually did. Instead, she stayed near her cabin, watching the sky alone. He respected her distance but worried silently. Over the next few days, small changes appeared. She packed some of her belongings more carefully. She avoided riding into town and stayed closer to the ranch buildings. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the horizon. One morning he finally spoke. "You're preparing to leave," he said gently. She did not deny it. "It might be safer. For you? For everyone." He leaned against the fence, thinking carefully before responding. "I don't know your past, but you don't have to face it alone." She shook her head. "Some things follow you no matter where you go. I don't want your life complicated because of me."
"It's already complicated," he replied calmly. "That's life." She looked at him, surprised by the quiet strength in his voice.
"I don't belong here," she said. He studied her for a moment. "You work here. You help here." "That sounds like belonging to me." Her expression softened briefly before hardening again. "I won't stay if it brings trouble." The word trouble hung between them. That afternoon, while repairing a water line, she finally began sharing pieces of her story. Not everything, just enough. She had traveled through many places searching for work and safety. Some people had treated her kindly, others had not. She had learned to depend only on herself, because promises often broke. The man who visited represented a time she wanted to leave behind. A period filled with pressure and expectations she refused to accept. "I thought coming here meant starting over," she said quietly. "It still can," he replied. She shook her head slowly. Nothing stays simple. Later that week, rumors reached the ranch from town. The stranger had been asking questions about her, spreading stories that were not entirely true. Some townspeople became curious, others cautious. She felt a familiar urge to leave before rejection could happen. One evening she approached him while he was repairing a saddle. "I'll go tomorrow," she said. He set the tool down slowly. "You already decided?"
Yes. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he spoke carefully.
"Are you leaving because you want to or because you think you should?" She did not answer immediately. "I don't want to bring problems into your life," she said. "That's my choice to make," he replied gently. She looked away, struggling with emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. "I'm used to leaving," she whispered. "Staying is harder." He understood that more than she realized. He walked toward her slowly. "You don't have to prove strength by walking away." Her eyes filled with quiet conflict. "You don't understand," she said softly. "Then help me understand." For a long moment, she said nothing. The wind moved through the grass around them. Finally, she admitted, "If I stay, I might start believing I can belong somewhere. And when that ends, it hurts more." He nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in her words. "I won't promise things I can't control," he said. "But I can promise this. You won't stand alone here." The simple honesty touched something deep inside her. That night she sat outside her cabin, thinking about everything she had learned on the ranch. She remembered how he never forced answers, never treated her like someone broken, never tried to change who she was. For the first time in years, she felt torn between leaving and staying. Morning arrived quietly. She packed her bag but did not move right away. The ranch felt different now. No longer just a place to rest, but a place connected to her heart. When she walked toward the barn, he stood waiting, as if he already knew her thoughts. "You don't have to decide today," he said calmly. She stared at him, surprised again by his patience. "I thought you would tell me to go," she said. "I won't make that choice for you." The weight of freedom felt heavy, but also comforting. She looked around the ranch, the wide fields, the steady animals, the quiet life they had built together. For the first time, she wondered if running away was truly strength or just fear. Morning came slowly, bringing a pale light across the ranch. The woman stood outside her cabin with her bag packed, her eyes moving across the open land as if trying to memorize every detail. The air felt still, almost as if the world waited for her decision. She had not left yet. Inside her, two voices argued quietly. One told her to leave before she became too attached, before the peace she had found here turned into another painful memory. The other voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she could stay and try something different. The rancher worked near the barn, giving her space. He did not rush her or ask questions. His calm presence felt like an anchor, steady and patient. After a long time, she walked toward him. "I haven't gone," she said quietly. He nodded, as if he already knew. "I noticed." She shifted her weight slightly. "I don't know what I'm doing." "That's all right," he replied. "Most people don't." A small smile almost appeared on her face before fading again. She placed her bag on the ground near the barn but did not unpack it. It remained there like a reminder that leaving was still possible. The day's work began as usual. They repaired a broken fence line and guided a group of horses toward fresh grass. The normal rhythm helped calm her thoughts, but something had changed between them. The unspoken decision to stay, at least for now, felt significant. As they worked, he spoke gently. "You don't have to prove anything here." She looked at him.
"I know. That's what makes it difficult."
He understood. Freedom sometimes felt heavier than obligation. Over the next few days, she noticed small changes within herself. She laughed once while watching a stubborn horse refuse to move, surprising both of them. She began humming again while working, her voice soft but steady. The guarded walls around her heart did not disappear completely, but small openings appeared. One evening they sat together near the edge of the field, watching the sunset. The sky turned deep orange and pink, and the quiet felt warm rather than empty.
"I used to think staying somewhere meant losing myself," she said suddenly.
And now?
He asked.
I'm not sure anymore.
He nodded, waiting for her to continue. "When I moved from place to place, I told myself I was strong because I didn't need anyone," she said slowly. "But maybe I was just afraid." He listened carefully, understanding that these words required courage. "Fear isn't weakness," he said. "It's just part of being human." She looked down at her hands.
I told you before, I'm not made for love.
He remembered clearly. "And do you still believe that?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "I don't know." The admission felt like a small step forward. Days passed with growing ease between them. They shared more conversations about simple memories, favorite places, and quiet dreams they had never spoken aloud before. She learned that he had once lived a very different life, full of noise and responsibility, before choosing the quiet ranch. He learned that she had traveled far, carrying stories she was only beginning to share. One afternoon, while repairing the roof of a small shed, she slipped slightly on the ladder. He reached out instinctively to steady her again. This time she did not pull away immediately. For a brief moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Not pressure, not expectation, just understanding. She stepped back slowly, her heart beating faster than she expected. That evening, while preparing dinner together, she spoke again.
"You said before people aren't broken tools." "I remember," he replied. "I think I started believing I was," she said softly.
"Something damaged that no one could fix." He set down the knife he was using and faced her. "You're not something that needs fixing," he said gently. "You're someone who deserves peace." The words settled deep inside her. Later that night, she walked alone across the field, feeling the cool air against her skin. The stars above looked endless. She realized that for the first time in years she felt safe enough to think about the future rather than just the next day. But with that realization came fear again. The stranger from her past had not returned, yet she knew he could. The possibility lingered like a shadow. She wondered if staying would eventually bring conflict to the rancher's life. The next morning she finally unpacked her bag. It was a small action, but it felt significant, a quiet choice to remain present. He noticed but did not comment. Instead, he handed her a cup of tea, and they began their work as usual. Over time, the ranch started to focus around their shared routine. She added small touches to the space, organizing tools more efficiently, planting flowers near the cabin, repairing old curtains. These changes transformed the ranch subtly, making it feel warmer. One afternoon, while resting near the barn, he said softly, "You've changed this place."
No, it was already good.
Maybe, he replied, but it feels less empty now. They began spending more evenings together outside, watching the sky and sharing quiet conversations. Sometimes they spoke about deep things. Other times they simply enjoyed silence. One night after a long day, she asked, "Why did you ask me to come here in the first place?" He thought carefully before answering. "Because I saw someone trying to carry too much alone." "And you weren't afraid?" she asked. "Of what? Of letting someone into your life again?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I was, but loneliness is heavier." His honesty touched her deeply. As days turned into weeks, the emotional distance between them softened further. She began to trust not only him but also herself, trusting that she could stay without losing independence. That connection did not mean weakness. One evening, while standing near the fence, he spoke words that stayed with her. "You don't have to keep preparing to leave," he said quietly. "You can just be here." "I'm trying," she whispered. He nodded. "That's enough." The moment felt simple but powerful. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, she realized that staying had slowly become less frightening. The ranch no longer felt like temporary shelter. It felt like a place where she could grow. The seasons began to change slowly across the ranch. The air felt warmer during the day, and soft green life returned to the fields after months of dry wind. Time moved gently, almost unnoticed, yet both of them felt the quiet shift happening inside their lives. She no longer counted the days as temporary. Her belongings had settled naturally into the small cabin, and her presence became part of the ranch's rhythm. Each morning started with shared work, and each evening ended with calm conversations or peaceful silence. The space between them felt comfortable now, filled with trust that had grown little by little. Still, something remained unspoken. She often thought about the words she had said when they first met, that she was not made for love. Those words had once felt like truth, like a shield she carried to protect herself from disappointment. Now, standing in the middle of the ranch watching the sunrise, she wondered if she had been wrong. One morning, while brushing one of the horses, she noticed how easily she moved through the day. She smiled without forcing it. She hummed without stopping herself. The heavy feeling she used to carry had softened. The rancher approached quietly, handing her a cup of tea. "You seem lighter today," he said. She laughed softly. "Maybe I slept well. Or maybe you're finally letting yourself rest," he replied. Later that day they rode into town together to buy supplies. This time she walked through the streets without the same fear she had felt before. Some people greeted her politely, recognizing her now as part of the ranch. She felt nervous, but also proud of the change. Inside the store, she noticed a few curious glances, but chose not to focus on them. Instead, she helped carry supplies and spoke calmly with the shop owner. As they left town, she felt a strange warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had not allowed herself to feel before. "You handled that well," he said as they rode back. "I think I stopped caring so much about what people think," she replied. "That sounds like freedom." She smiled slightly. Back at the ranch, they worked together repairing a gate damaged by wind. The task required teamwork, and their movements felt natural, almost like a silent dance they had learned together over time. At one point, she paused and looked at him seriously. "Why did you stay patient with me?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Because I saw someone worth waiting for." Her breath caught slightly at the honesty in his voice. That evening, as the sun began to set, they sat near the field again. The sky turned soft gold, and birds crossed slowly overhead. "I used to think love meant losing control," she said quietly. "That it would take away who I was. And now?" he asked gently. "Now I think love might be choosing to stay. Even when you're afraid." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind her words. The silence between them felt warm rather than heavy. Over the next few days she noticed how her thoughts changed. Instead of planning escape routes or preparing for departure, she began imagining the future, planting more flowers near the cabin, repairing another part of the fence, maybe even expanding the garden. These thoughts surprised her. One afternoon, while organizing tools in the barn, she found herself laughing again at a small mistake she made. The sound echoed softly, and she realized she no longer felt like a stranger here. But deep inside, a final fear remained. What if this peace disappeared? What if loving someone meant losing them? That evening, she walked alone across the fields, thinking carefully. The sky filled with stars, and the quiet felt comforting. She remembered all the time she had run away from connection, believing it was safer to remain alone. Yet loneliness had never truly protected her. She returned to the house where the rancher sat repairing a broken saddle. "I need to say something," she began. He set the saddle aside and listened. "I've spent a long time believing I wasn't made for love," she said slowly. "I thought it meant weakness or pain waiting to happen. But staying here changed something," she continued. "You never tried to control me. You never asked me to be different. You just stayed." He smiled gently. "That's what people do when they care." Her eyes filled with quiet emotion. "I'm still afraid," she admitted. "That's all right," he said softly. "Fear doesn't mean you should walk away. For the first time, I want to stay because I choose to, not because I have nowhere else to go." The words felt powerful. He stepped closer, but gave her space, allowing her to lead the moment. She looked at him with honesty she had never allowed before. "I don't know what the future looks like," she said, "but I know I don't want to face it alone anymore." His voice remained calm but warm. "Neither do I." They stood quietly together, the space between them filled with understanding rather than uncertainty. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch continued to grow into a shared life. They worked side by side, supported each other through challenges, and learned to trust the quiet strength they had built together. There were no grand promises or perfect moments, only small, meaningful actions that showed care. She planted a small garden near the house, and he helped without asking questions. They repaired old structures together, turning work into shared accomplishment. Even silence felt like connection. One evening, while watching the sunset, he spoke softly. "You remember when you said you weren't made for love?" She nodded. "What do you think now?" he asked. She smiled gently, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I think I was wrong," she said. "Maybe I just hadn't found the right place. Or the right person." He laughed quietly. The wind moved through the grass around them, carrying a sense of peace. She realized that love did not need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was simply two people choosing each other every day, through work, through silence, through trust. The ranch no longer felt like a temporary stop on her journey. It felt like home. Not because it erased her past, but because it allowed her to grow beyond it.